Hello, and welcome to FTA Circular 9070 Enhanced Mobility and Individuals with Disabilities Program Guidance Training Series. I am Heather Smith with the Office of Program Management. TPM 32 designed this series to provide our recipients and stakeholders a better understanding of changes made to FTA's official guidance on the Section 5310 program. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our speakers today. I will be joined by Destiny Buchanan. Destiny is the Section 5310 Program Manager. Please note that the official name is the 9070 Circular, but it is commonly referred to as the Section 5310 Program. To ensure we are all on the same page, we want to remind everyone that this presentation does not have the force and effect of the law and is not intended to bind the public in any way. It is educational and informational in nature, with an intent to explain some of our existing requirements under laws or agency policies. Now, I would like to introduce Bruce Robinson to provide our welcoming remarks.
Hello, my name is Bruce Robinson, FTA's Associate Administrator for Program Management. On behalf of the team here at the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, I'm delighted to provide a brief introduction to the upcoming video training. FTA turned 60 years old this year, and one of our most exciting projects this year was updating several of FTA's major program circulars, as well as FTA's Award Management Requirement Circular, which is needed for all awards FTA administers. Over the last 2 years, staff worked tirelessly to update these circulars, working with headquarters and regional offices, as well as reaching out for public comment to update these documents. 4 circulars are Circular 5010, the Award Management Requirements Circular, Circular 9050, the Urbanized Area Formula Grant Program Guidance. This circular replaces, consolidates, and updates guidance for the Urbanized Area Formula Grant Program, the State of Good Repair Grant Program, and the Urbanized Area Formula component of the Grants of Buses and Bus Facilities Program. In addition, Circular 9040, the Rural Area Formula Grant Program Guidance, consolidates and updates guidance for the Buses and Bus Facilities Program that is rural, and the Formula Grants for Rural Area Program. Finally, Circular 97 is the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program Guidance. As part of the updated circular release, FTA developed a video series for each circular to relay key information and highlight changes. Additionally, the team developed a number of materials to help work with grantees and help set the stage for understanding federal financial assistance requirements surrounding administering federal fund awards. This circular and training series is specifically designed to assist FTA's efforts to improving customer service and streamlining our processes, as well as reflecting and incorporating provisions from the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or more commonly the FAST Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as changes to the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards, more commonly referred to as 2 CFR 200 or the Uniform Guidance, as well as incorporating changes to FTA's policies and procedures. We hope you find these videos informative. FTA has created a general email address for questions related to this update, FTA Circular Update 2024 at dot.gov, to assist in addressing questions regarding this release. For questions about information in the circulars, please reach out to your FTA regional contacts. But for now, please enjoy the show. Thank you.
Each Friday from October 18th through November 15th, 2024, FTA is posting a series of pre-recorded videos addressing summary grants management information and highlighting changes made in each of the revised circulars, including our award management requirement circulars and each of our formula program circulars. With these 9070 videos, our series comes to an end. Our Circular 9070 training builds upon the prior circular training series. The 9070 series was developed to highlight many of the structural and substantive changes made to the circular to help users navigate and better understand the circular as an administrative guidance tool. The illustration on the right outlines the general topics for the sessions in this series. Our route ahead is our agenda. For session 1, we will look primarily at the following topics. Introduction, we'll do a program overview, general program information, and then we'll talk about eligibility. In TPM 32, I facilitated the circular through the update process, so I'm going to kick things off with an introduction to Circular 9071H and discuss what's changed from the prior version of the circular. All planning and program-specific information remains in this circular, while general award management information and cross-cutting elements have been moved to 5010. To give a bit of history, the circular was last updated in 2014. Since 2014, Congress has made only one substantive change to 49 U.S. Code 5310. The FAST Act made states and local government entities that operate public transportation service eligible direct recipients, and the circular incorporates this change into the law. IIJA or BIL continued the Section 5310 program without any changes. So compared to the previous circular, here's a few items to note. One, it clarifies that transportation network companies, often called TNCs, are eligible as subrecipients if they operate public transportation. This circular also updates the list of eligible recipients to include states and local government authorities. And then finally, this circular moves the cross-cutting requirements to Circular 5010. So, those are the major changes you will notice in 9071H. And now I'm going to turn it over to our speaker today, the Section 5310 Program Manager, Destiny Buchanan, to take us through the circular in depth.
Thank you, Heather. The purpose of the 9071H circular is to provide guidance on the specific procedures and requirements of the Section 5310 program, including tools for current or potential recipients to understand the requirements or considerations that may apply to their specific situation, and explains how laws, regulations, or policies active at the time of publication apply to FTA-assisted activities and awards. This circular does not provide guidance on the requirements and procedures required by all FTA grants. It does not provide case-specific guidance or directions for each unique situation. It does not provide topic-specific technical assistance, and it does not substitute for applicable laws, regulations, or policies that are determined outside of the scope of the circular. Here you can see where circulars fall in the hierarchy of the overall federal statute. The circular is the blueprint for the applicability of laws, regulations, and policies that were established outside the scope of the circular. Explanations of the applicability and references to external sources from which the requirements are derived are provided throughout the circular. However, the circular also sets some policies on its own that builds upon and is not directly addressed by federal statutes or regulations. You may be directed to a certain portion of the circular via a citation like this one here, Chapter 3, Section 5. This corresponds to the table of content, Chapter 3, General Information, and Section 5, Eligible Direct Recipients. If you click on the heading within the table of contents, it will take you directly to the corresponding section. Also of note is the unique page numbering system used by the circular. You will see this Direct Recipient section is on page 3, Chapter 3. That means the third page of the third chapter. The numbering system resets each chapter. For example, you'll see Chapter 1, page 1, and you'll also see Chapter 2, page 2. Here is a list of relevant definitions that correspond to terms that will be used in the circular and in this presentation. I would like to highlight the following terms that I will be using. The term disability has the same meaning as in Section 3, Part 1 of the Americans with Disabilities Act. In this circular and presentation, the terms person with a disability or people with disabilities have the same meaning as individual with a disability. The term human service transportation refers to transportation services provided by or on behalf of a human service agency to provide access to agency services and/or to meet the basic day-to-day mobility needs of the transportation disadvantaged, especially older adults, people with disabilities, and people with low incomes. The term recipient refers to an entity that is awarded funds directly from FTA to carry out an activity under a federal program to support a specific project. In this circular and presentation, the term recipient is interchangeable with grant recipient and direct recipient. The term recipient does not include subrecipient. Here you will find a list of selected acronyms used throughout the circular and presentation. I will now go over the program overview and requirement. The goal of the Section 5310 program is to improve mobility for older adults and people with disabilities by removing barriers to transportation services and expanding the transportation mobility options available. Financial assistance is given for transportation services planned, designed, and carried out to meet the specific needs of older adults and people with disabilities in all areas, including large, small, and rural areas. The program requires coordination with other federally assisted programs and services to make the most efficient use of federal resources. States and designated recipients are responsible for submitting quantitative and qualitative information on the Section 5310 program measures. These measures are then used to give an independent evaluation of the overall program. The measures are split into two different sections: measures for traditional Section 5310 projects, which are gaps in service field and ridership, and measures for non-traditional Section 5310 projects, which are geographic coverage, service quality, and/or service times, changes to physical infrastructure, and the actual or estimated number of rides. Program data is collected annually. For additional information on the Section 5310 program measures, refer to Chapter 2, Section 3. FTA is split into two sections: headquarters and regional offices. FTA headquarters staff have a broad program-level role in the administration of the program, while the FTA regional offices have the day-to-day responsibilities for administration of the program. Both work together to give a general oversight of the program. States are subject to a State Management Review, or SMR, while designated recipients are subject to a Triennial Review, or TR. These reviews are regularly scheduled to evaluate the performance and management procedures of recipients. Triennials and State Management Reviews are conducted in accordance with the latest CORTAP manual, which is publicly available on FTA's website. For additional information on program administration, refer to Chapter 2, Section 4. Section 5310 funds are apportioned annually to states and designated recipients who are responsible for receiving, administering, and apportioning the funds for eligible projects and recipients. States are responsible for Section 5310 funds in small urban areas, which have populations between 50,000 and 199,999, and rural areas, which have populations below 50,000. While designated recipients are responsible for administering the funds in large urban areas, which have populations above 200,000. Additional information on the roles of the designated recipients and state, refer to Chapter 2, 6A. FTA gives designated recipients and states maximum discretion in designing and managing the Section 5310 program. Where possible, FTA defers to a recipient's development of program standards, procedures, and policies to provide them with the flexibility they need to standardize their management of FTA's funds. However, the designated recipient and states are responsible for documenting the procedures for carrying out a state or program management plan, exercise oversight of the funds to ensure only eligible activities and subrecipients meet federal requirements, ensure fair and equitable distribution of program funds, certify that all projects are included in a locally developed coordinated public transit human services transportation plan that was developed inclusively, certify that to the maximum extent feasible that services funded with Section 5310 funds were coordinated with transportation services assisted by other federal departments and agencies, and ensure that at least 55% of an area's apportionment is used for traditional Section 5310 projects carried out by an eligible subrecipient. For additional information on the role of designated recipients and states, refer to Chapter 2, Section 5. In large urban areas, the governor or governor's designee must identify a designated recipient to administer the 5310 program. Designations become effective when the governor of a state notifies the appropriate FTA regional administrator in writing of the designation. The written designation must include documentation of concurrence in the selection of the designated recipient by the public transit service providers in the UZA and a resolution of the MPO concurring in the designation. The designation letter must be on file with the FTA regional office before grant applications can be submitted for FTA review and before the funds are awarded. This designation remains in effect until changed by the governor by official notice of redesignation to the appropriate regional office. For additional information on the designated recipient process, refer to Chapter 2, Section 6. Of the total Section 5310 funds available, 60% of funds are apportioned to large urban areas, while the small urban and rural areas each receive 20% of the funding. This distribution is based on an area's census data on older adults over the age of 65 and people with disabilities over the age of 5. For example, a large UZA's apportionment is based on the ratio of older adults and people with disabilities in that UZA compared to the number of people in all UZAs. Annual apportionments are published on FTA's website following the enactment of the annual U.S. DOT Appropriation Act. Additional information on the apportionment of funds can be found in Chapter 3, Section 1. Section 5310 funds can be transferred from small urban or rural areas in the following instances. To another small urban or rural area, if the governor of the state certifies that all of the objectives of the Section 5310 program are being met in the area from which the funds are being transferred. To a large urban area, if the state has established a statewide program for meeting the objectives of the Section 5310 program. Section 5310 funds can only be transferred after consulting with responsible local officials, publicly owned operators of public transportation, and nonprofit providers in the area from which the funds are being transferred. Note, funds apportioned to large urban areas may not be transferred to other areas. Section 5310 funds cannot be transferred to other FTA programs either. Flexible funds from FHWA may be transferred to the Section 5310 program. The funds are treated as Section 5310 funds when this occurs and follows the Section 5310 requirements, except for the local match and 55% traditional capital project requirements imposed on the Section 5310 program. Additional information on transfers can be found in Chapter 3, Section 3. 55% of an area's apportionment must be used for traditional capital projects that are planned, designed, and carried out to meet the needs of older adults and people with disabilities. This 55% requirement is a floor, not a ceiling, which means at least 55% of an area's apportionment must be used for traditional capital projects, but the recipient could choose to use 100% of the funds for a traditional capital project or any combination above 55%. In addition to the 55%, up to 10% of an area's apportionments can be used for administrative purposes, and up to 45% can be used for other eligible capital and operating expenses. A sample allocation of an area's apportionment can be found in Table 4-1. Up to 10% of an area's apportioned Section 5310 funds can be used to administer the Section 5310 program, related planning, and to provide technical assistance to the subrecipients. Some allowable administrative costs include salaries, overhead expenses, supplies, and office equipment used to administer the program. Allowable technical assistance costs include program planning and program development. And this may be funded at 100% federal share, which means no local share is required for administrative expenses. Guidance on eligible administrative costs can be found in Subpart E to 2 CFR Part 200. Eligible capital project expenses involve purchasing, leasing, constructing, maintaining, or repairing facilities, rolling stock, and equipment for use in a public transportation system. With some exception, the federal share of capital projects may not exceed 80% of the net operating cost of the activity. Exceptions include certain projects related to the ADA and CAA. Additional information on exceptions to the federal share can be found in Chapter 3, Section 10B. Operating expenses are those costs directly related to system operations. At a minimum, the following items must be considered operating expenses: fuel, driver salaries and fringe benefits, dispatcher salaries and fringe benefits, and licenses. The federal share of eligible operating costs may not exceed 50% of the net operating cost of the activity. Exceptions include certain projects related to the ADA and CAA. Additional information on exceptions can be found in Chapter 3, Section 10B. Section 5310 funds may be used to finance capital and operating expenses. The local share for these projects may be derived from undistributed cash surplus, replacement or depreciation cash fund or reserve, service agreements with a state or local service agency or a private social service organization, or new capital. Examples of sources of local match include state or local appropriations, dedicated tax revenues, and private donations. Additional examples can be found in Chapter 3, Section 10A. The local share may be derived from federal programs that are eligible to be expended for transportation other than DOT programs or from DOT's Federal Lands Highway Program. This means that funds from non-DOT federal agencies can be used as a local match for the Section 5310 program. Examples of potential sources of local match include employment, training, aging, medical, community services, and rehabilitation services. Specific resources for finding program information about other federal funding that can be used to meet the local share requirements for 5310 can be found on FTA's CCAM webpage. The final section is on eligibility requirements. Section 5310 funds are available for capital and operating expenses to support the provision of transportation services to meet the specific needs of older adults and people with disabilities. Grants under the section can be used for public transportation capital projects planned, designed, and carried out to meet the needs of older adults, people with disabilities, when public transportation is insufficient, inappropriate, or unavailable. For public transportation projects that exceed the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. For public transportation projects that improve access to existing fixed route service and decrease reliance of people with disabilities on complementary paratransit. Or to provide alternatives to public transportation that assist older adults and people with disabilities with transportation. 55% of an area's apportionment must be used for traditional capital projects designed, carried out, and intended to benefit older adults and/or people with disabilities. Capital activities to support ADA complementary paratransit services may qualify toward the 55% requirement if the service is provided by an eligible recipient or subrecipient and is included in the coordinated plan. Examples of eligible traditional capital projects include the purchasing of vehicles such as accessible buses and vans, wheelchair lifts and ramps, mobility management, the deployment of software, and the acquisition of transportation services. Additional examples of eligible traditional capital expenses can be found in Chapter 4, Sections 2A through F. Acquisition of transportation services under a contract, lease, or other arrangement are eligible traditional capital expenses under the Section 5310 program. Both capital and operating costs associated with the contracted services are eligible capital expenses. Funds may be requested for contracted services covering a time period of more than 1 year. For example, a nonprofit organization receiving Section 5310 funds can establish a contract with a for-profit provider of non-emergency medical transportation services to provide transportation services to the nonprofit's older adults and/or people with disabilities. The capital eligibility of acquisition services is limited to the Section 5310 program. Non-traditional Section 5310 projects can also fund traditional capital projects. In addition to that, they can also fund capital or operating projects that exceed the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act, public transportation projects that improve access to existing fixed route service and decrease reliance of people with disabilities on complementary paratransit, or to provide alternatives to public transportation that assist older adults and people with disabilities with transportation. Examples of these eligible activities include travel training, volunteer driver programs, building accessible features, and providing same-day or door-to-door services. Section 5310 operating assistance can only be used for required ADA complementary paratransit services if it is being used to extend ADA complementary paratransit services beyond what is required by ADA regulations, or if it is being used for acquisitions of transportation services for older adults and people with disabilities, including ADA complementary paratransit services, as an eligible capital expense. Additional information on the limits of operating assistance can be found in Chapter 4, Section 3E. The FAST Act amended the definition of recipient in the Section 5310 program to allow state or local government authorities to be direct recipients. In addition to states and local government authorities, states and designated recipients are also eligible direct recipients. When this occurs, instead of entering into a subrecipient relationship with a designated recipient or state, a direct recipient can apply for their funds directly through TRAMS. The direct recipient and designated recipient or state enter into a supplemental agreement which releases the designated recipient or state of any liability under the award agreement. Supplemental agreements can be downloaded from the FTA Grant Agreement webpage. For additional information on direct recipients, refer to Chapter 3, Section 5. Eligible subrecipients of traditional Section 5310 projects include private nonprofit organizations, a state or local government authority that is approved by a state to coordinate services for older adults or people with disabilities, or one that certifies that there are no nonprofit organizations readily available in the area to provide the service. Government authorities eligible to apply for Section 5310 funds as coordinators of services for older adults and people with disabilities are those designated by the state to coordinate human service agencies in a particular area. Examples of those include county agencies on aging or public transit providers that serve as the lead agency to coordinate transportation services funded by multiple federal or state human service programs, such as an MPO. Eligible subrecipients for non-traditional Section 5310 projects include states, local government authorities, private nonprofits, and operators of public transportation. Subrecipients receiving funding in this category do not have to certify that they are approved to coordinate transportation services or that there are no nonprofits readily available in the area to give the service. Private taxi companies and transportation network companies, also known as TNCs, that provide shared ride on-demand service to the general public on a regular basis are operators of public transportation and therefore eligible subrecipients. Shared ride means two or more passengers in the same vehicle who are otherwise not traveling together. Every trip does not have to be shared in order for a company to be considered a shared ride operator, but the general nature of the service must include shared rides. Local statutes or regulations or company policies will generally determine whether an entity provides shared ride or exclusive ride service. Taxi companies and TNCs that provide only exclusive ride service are not eligible subrecipients of the funding. However, they may participate in the Section 5310 program as contractors. The primary federal award recipient should request documentation from the taxi company or TNC prior to award. As subrecipients, private taxi companies and TNCs are subject to the same federal requirements as the recipient making the subgrant. This slide helps illustrate the difference between shared ride and exclusive ride. Shared ride is open to accommodating two or more passengers who are not otherwise traveling together in the same vehicle at the same time on a regular basis during a period of funded service. This service may not be reserved for exclusive use by individuals or private groups and must not require the consent from passengers or the driver to accommodate the additional passengers. While an exclusive ride is restricted to being open to only one passenger in a vehicle at a time during the period of funded service. This can be reserved for exclusive use by individuals or private groups or requires the consent from the passenger or driver to accommodate additional passengers. This slide illustrates notable differences between traditional and non-traditional projects. Traditional projects are capital only, and in regards to subrecipients, private nonprofits are always eligible. States and local government authorities are sometimes eligible under certain circumstances, while operators of public transportation are not eligible subrecipients of the traditional Section 5310 funds. Non-traditional projects include both capital and operating expenses. And in regards to their subrecipients, private nonprofits states and local government authorities, and operators of public transportation are always eligible, while taxis and TNCs are sometimes eligible under certain circumstances. This slide illustrates Table 4-1, which included the sample allocation of an area's apportionment. Both of the examples below utilize 55% of their funding for traditional 5310 projects, which was the minimum, and utilize the remaining 45% for different combinations of program administration and non-traditional projects. This concludes this presentation. Now over to Heather to close us out.
Great, thank you. This concludes our formal presentation of session 1 of 2 sessions for our Circular 9070 1H training series. This is our last series of videos that will be posted to FTA's website through mid-November 2025. The email address goes right to our office, and we will follow up to address those questions and concerns. Also included are links to the finalized circulars. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can reference these links here or contact us at FTA Circular Update 2024 at dot.gov. As part of our ongoing efforts and commitment to serving the public, FTA is committed to improving America's communities through improving public transportation. We share a vision of fostering a better quality of life for all, built on public transportation excellence through commitment to service, integrity, innovation, sustainability, and equity. Thank you again for watching. We hope you will view other videos related to the 2024 circulars. This concludes the recording. Thank you again.